over the last several decades, there's been such a normalization of pornography
Yes.
as something that's just normal. Everybody does it. It's no big deal. It's just fantasy. You can there's a list of things that way people normalize it.
Yeah.
But I think it's important when we reframe it, when we actually really look at it closely from all its facets and see it for what it is as a form of prostitution. It's just at a remove. Like, in normal prostitution, maybe not normal, but it's sort of the wrong word, but like in prostitution, in the typical physical world that we inhabit, it's a personal exchange between people who are in the same space. But with pornography, it's able to be, especially now with the internet, it's at a remove. So there's an intermediary, but there's still this exchange. There's still a sex act is being performed, and it's being performed for payment, even if you don't pay for it. Right. So the whole model that's been operating for quite some time now, this freemium pornography model where vast quantities of pornography are free, but that's all to entice the user to come in deeper to engage in the paid material.
That's right.
So, these people aren't doing it for free. They're doing it for money. And that money is coercive. Right. It's a factor because like this person would you ask yourself, would this person be having sex with you in person? Would this person only have sex with you if you paid for it? If the answer is yes, the only way they would ever have sex with you is because you paid them, then that's coercive. That's exploitation.
Yeah.
Ask yourself, what do you know about this human being? What do you know about them other than their porn name? Right? You can see their physical appearance, but you don't know about their identity, their childhood, how they grew up, how they're feeling, what their birthday is, what their favorite color is. Like, really, do you know them at all? No. And that's another like serious red flag because engaging in sex should be an act of intimacy between people who at least have some level of caring between each other. Not complete strangers. That's impersonal sex. That is a major red flag. Something that is dangerous and harmful behavior, both to yourself and to the person that you're engaging with that in. So it definitely, we have to rethink, reframe the discussion around pornography from something that's harmless and a joke to something that's really serious and exploitive to the people who both use it and who are used in the production of it.
I think you're making a really good point about pornography itself being exploitive. And so you kind of touched on, okay, so when we think of people being exploited, we think of sex trafficking, prostitution, those kinds of things. It's all exploitive, but how does pornography contribute and fuel those riskier, more violent, more known ways that we think of sex trafficking? How does it connect and how does it fuel that?
Yeah, I guess the one thing I would make a little caveat right there. I wouldn't say that that those other forms of exploitation are necessarily risky or necessarily absolutely worse. I mean, there's a lot of horrible exploitation and sex trafficking that even goes on within the pornography production industry. Okay, so I don't want to create like a tier of, one is worse than the other. But I think to get to your point, Ashley, about how they intersect and interconnect, you can kind of see behind me that there's a graphic that the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, we worked a long time on. We wanted to create a visual that gave people an idea of what we call the web of sexual abuse and exploitation, to show how one form of sexual exploitation can connect to, fuel, feed into other forms of sexual abuse and exploitation.
Yeah,
and pornography is really the I would say the touchstone of so many other forms. It's like the foundation where so many other the webs, legs on the spider come out. Whether it's just something like child sexual abuse, pornography being used to groom children by predators who want to sexually use children, and they show them pornography in order to disinhibit them, to expose them to what sex is, and to help them to know what they expect them to do. as in like, oh, see these people doing this in this picture? Doesn't this look great? Let's do this. So pornography is a very powerful tool for perpetrators who want to groom children. And in fact, I mean, really, the sad reality is today that our society has become so pornified that the job of predators has become much easier
Mhm.
because there's so much pornography out there that children can see themselves as children stumbling onto it online. Then they start emulating those behaviors, right? They start
Yeah.
self-sexualizing themselves and they start self-generating pornography and they start sharing it. I mean, this is a child sexual perpetrator's dream. And
Yeah.
then the children share it, right? They share it. They might, because one minor sends it to another minor, and then one minor thinks, oh, well, how funny. I'm going to send this to the other kid. So it gets distributed among other children. And then somebody gets it, some adult sees it, and it gets uploaded to major pornography sites. So today, the irony is that a lot of the child predators don't actually have to produce a lot of the content that is on like dark websites because it's self-produced material. The Internet Watch Foundation has reported on that repeatedly, how huge quantities of self-produced material that children have created of themselves and shared with others has ended up
Yeah.
on these child pornography platforms, I should say child sexual abuse material platforms online.
And I would imagine much of that without a parent's awareness, things that are happening behind their backs that then lead to these incredible, horrific problems.
Almost every case I've read about or seen or article where somebody was abducted or raped violently or something, most of the time we were able to see that the perpetrator was viewing pornography and at some point then stepped out of viewing pornography and acted out with her. Just like you were saying with the kids, that they can use it as a grooming tool to say, hey, let's try this. But then also people are consuming violent porn and saying, I want that now. I want the real thing. I don't want to watch anymore. I want to go do it. And so
Right. So
that kind of connection.
you've touched on a very interesting topic, which is the escalation that can happen
Yes.
in pornography consuming behaviors. So
Hmm.
if we roll back, a couple decades, maybe 3 decades, and people are consuming pornography at the beginning of the internet. A lot of that stuff was still images. We had slow dial-up
Right.
connections, right? It wasn't as graphic, as it is now. Like now, everything is so vivid. It's so real. And it's incredibly powerful visual stimulus that people who are looking at the stuff get. It's a very powerful visual stimulus, and I really think we should start thinking about pornography as a consumable, just like as if you would be eating your dinner and you're, having your, I don't know, your cheeseburger, whatever it is you're having for dinner. You've consumed, you've taken it into yourself by eating it. You're consuming pornography visually,
Yep.
and it's a diet. It's a diet that you can put into yourself. And as you put in more and more and more, you get tired, right? I mean, we all don't want to eat the same thing every day, do we? We get tired of nobody's going to want to eat I don't know, trying to think of something that you wouldn't want to eat, asparagus every day.
Anything every day.
Yeah, most of us want variety in our diet. And so the same kind of thing happens with pornography. You consume whatever you started out
Yeah.
with, and okay, yeah, it's not having the same reward
Yeah.
in our brains. It's not giving us the same level of satisfaction. So we start venturing out to try new other things. So whether it's, we're eating food or we're consuming pornography. So the pornography consumer begins exploring. And plus today there really is, there's so few margins. I mean, like, what do I mean? There these so many niches and fetishes are all feeding into mainstream forms of pornography, that's very easy for a consumer to start going down this trail that leads into harder, more extreme material in very little time. And so even today, like children, like for instance, there was a survey, well, I can't remember if it was 2023. I think it was in 2023, of like over 1,300 kids. It wasn't a nationally representative study, but it was a survey of a large group of kids, and more than 73% of them had seen pornography. And these kids were 13 to 17-year-olds. Okay. More than 73% had seen pornography. But what was, I think, one of the more startling things was that more than 50% of them had seen forms of violent pornography, like something that was violent, somebody being choked, somebody that seemed like they were in pain, or even something that seemed like it was depicting rape.
Yeah.
53% of the group that had seen pornography said they had seen something like that. So, of course, that's going to be conditioning them to think that that's normal sex.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's just so many problems here because it's conditioning these children to, it's changing their whole sexual template about what's attractive, what's normal. It's a sexual socialization when you consume this stuff. This is the way that society, it's the message that they're getting is, oh, this is how we have sexual relations in our world. This is what it's supposed to look like. And then, of course, they're going to emulate that with each other when they do, have relationships with each other. And that's really sad because, I mean, I can't imagine I try to think back to my childhood, and if the situation was like, I mean, it just blows my mind was I know what kids are seeing, and I can't imagine how hard it is to grow up in this environment and to navigate boy-girl relationships or intimate relationships when you've got this type of stuff circulating around you.
Yeah. I think this topic of escalation is such an important one because as I look at the graphic behind you, and by the way, a good shout out if you aren't watching our YouTube video channel and seeing it there, you'll have to go and check it out so you know what we've been referring to. But on that graphic, I think the reality is that everybody has drawn a line somewhere where they've said, well, I'm comfortable with this level. Maybe it's objectification. Maybe they've allowed, provocative images on social media into their life, or they're into pornography or into more progressive pornography or wherever it is. I think people would say, well, up to this line, I'm not that concerned about. Mm-hmm. But then what happens, in the work we see is we work with people in addiction and who come into our groups. Every single one of them at some point ends up saying, I crossed a line I never thought I'd cross. And that doesn't mean they've all ended up in extreme form of something illegal. But I just think there's something in our human nature, and you're describing it, that in escalation, what we've been viewing isn't creating the same hit or the same dopamine payoff, and we go further and deeper. And that's the nature of this battle. And so if we recognize it and say, oh, there is a place I'm comfortable with, but it leads to the next place that I'm not comfortable with, then I need to take some really proactive steps to get off of this spectrum to say, I'm not okay with objectification. I'm not okay with exploitation at any level because I know where it goes and that's where it pulls people. And whether I think I'm ever going to end up there personally or not, I've got to have enough awareness and enough wisdom to look at what's happening in our world and say, this is what happens to people. And if I want to avoid going to those other places, then wherever I'm at currently, I need to deal with that here and not wait for it to cross the line. Because like I said, I then in groups have the people saying, I never thought I'd be here, but I crossed that line. And it's simply their brain craving the next hit or the next thing that will make them feel what they felt at some other point. And to just name that and call it what it is, I think is incredibly helpful.